I remember the 12th of October 1989 very clearly. It was a cold, damp, rotting forest-smelling Maine day. We were a group of senior geology students assigned to survey soil samples in the eastern part of the Katahdin Range, a forest that is virtually unmarked on modern maps. It was the site of a glacial stratigraphy research station that had been abandoned since the mid-1970s. Professor Harris, our guide, had warned us before we left, "Don't stay after dark. The soil there absorbs dew quickly, and at night, the forest sounds strange." He said it half-jokingly, but with a hint of seriousness at the end. I didn't pay any attention. My only thought was to finish quickly and get back to school. The car stopped at the end of the dirt road. From there, we had to hike for nearly 2 hours to reach the marker. The trail was narrow, muddy, and full of tree roots. The air was getting more and more humid. The wind in the forest sounded like someone whispering under his breath. Around 5 p.m., David, my teammate, pointed ahead. Through the gray mist, I could see a slanted wooden roof, its planks faded. That hut, I knew immediately, was the old research station marked on the 1972 map. The door was ajar. When I pushed it open, the hinges made a long, metallic sigh. Inside was much colder than outside, dark and smelling of dampness. There were 2 bunk beds, a long table, and a few wooden shelves filled with tin cans and old maps. Water leaked from the roof, dripping into a rusty aluminum pot on the floor, splashing, 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 clearly audible in the dead silence. I swept my flashlight around the room, the dust rising like mist. On the table was a tin can. Inside were scraps of paper with notes. The technical writing recorded data on humidity, soil structure, sediment index. The typeface was even, dry, and emotionless. But behind one of the papers, someone had scribbled. There was a sound of footsteps on the floor. No one in the group. I shivered a little. The writing was hurried, slanted, as if the handwriting were shaking. David saw it and laughed. The old scientists here must be scaring each other. I laughed along, but inside I still felt something was wrong. Not because of the content, but because of the handwriting. Too real, too urgent, like writing in a panic. As I pushed the papers aside, I found a jammed drawer. I pulled hard. The wood creaked and dust flew up. Under the scraps of paper was a leather notebook, wet and cold. The cover was frayed at the edges, cut diagonally like a razor blade. There was no name, only a faint circle printed in the corner, like a lab seal. I opened it. The first page was written in pencil, in even, concise handwriting. March 1976. Project Ice Layer 9 begins. The first pages were full of data, compression, density, stratigraphic symbols. But as the book progressed, the handwriting became shakier. Page 18 read, "The third night, I couldn't sleep. I heard people walking around the station. They stopped in front of the door and then fell silent." Page 22. "I dreamed the ground was moving. When I woke up, there were mud footprints on the floor. No one recognized me." I turned to the last page. The writing was larger, darker, as if someone had pressed hard. "He came back, but it wasn't him anymore." The pencil broke in the middle of a sentence, the scratch extending to the edge of the page. I paused for a long time. For some reason, I felt like someone was standing behind me. When I turned back, there was nothing but David and the light of the oil lamp. I showed him the notebook, but when I turned to the last page, the writing was gone. The paper was still scratched, but the letters were blank. I thought maybe the damp had worn the pencil away. But that night, Lying in my sleeping bag, I kept hearing the tap-tap sound of dripping water, and somewhere in the middle of the night, I was sure I heard a fourth beat, light, like someone was walking very softly. Around 2 in the morning, I woke up. The oil lamp was still flickering. The wind whistled through the cracks in the wall. But for a moment, I could clearly hear footsteps on the wooden floor. Slow, heavy, step by step, then stopping right next to the door. I sat up, turned on the flashlight. No one was there. The door was still closed. But on the dusty floor right by the door, there was a wet mud trail, shaped like a bare foot, big, long, and pointing into the room. I woke David, but when he came to look, the mud trail had dried and almost disappeared, as if it had never existed. He cursed my imagination, then rolled over and went back to sleep. I didn't say anything more, just sat quietly listening to the night. Outside, the forest seemed to be breathing. The next morning, the sky was gray, the wind was cold. As I packed up, I was about to put the notebook back in my backpack when I discovered it was already open to the last page. This time, the same line appeared, but underneath it was another sentence, written in a completely different handwriting, italicized, smaller, and bolder. "Don't leave until I'm done with my part." I asked David if he had written it, and he swore he hadn't. I tried to take a picture with my Polaroid camera, but the film jammed, leaving only a white blur. The group left the station before it started to rain. We returned to school, submitted soil samples, wrote reports. Everything seemed over. I left the notebook on my desk, among the piles of documents. But about 2 weeks later, the geology department had a small fire in the basement where my group's samples were kept. The cause was said to be an electrical short circuit. Everything was burned, including the notebook. I never saw it again. A few years later, I happened to meet Professor Harris again at a conference. I told him the story of the hut, just like it was old news. He was silent for a long time, then poured more coffee. When I mentioned Ice Layer 9 project, he put down his cup, his face pale. "Where did you read that name?" he asked. "In a diary, found at the old station," I said. He just looked out the window, shaking his head. "They never announced it as a project. It was a private group cooperating with the military. The official documents were confiscated by 1977. No one is allowed to mention it anymore." I asked him what he knew about the group. He replied, "I only know one thing: the leader went missing after the icefall that year. They didn't find a body, just his wet shoes and a soaked notebook. It might be the one you found." That evening, driving home, I turned on the radio. All I heard was static. In the static, I heard a short phrase, like someone whispering, very softly, "Don't leave here." Then it stopped. I stopped the car, and for a long time I was silent in the middle of the road, listening to my heart beat in sync with the tap, 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 as if it were falling from the old tent roof into the aluminum pot. To this day, more than 30 years later, I have not been back to Katahdin. But every time I read a story about an icefall or a disappearance in the northern forest, I remember the damp, cold smell of rotting wood, the pale yellow light filtering through the cracks in the wall, and the burned diary. There are things that don't need proof to exist, like the condensation on your wrist when you stand near the past. Sometimes on rainy nights I hear the distinct tap, tap, tap from somewhere in the house's plumbing, and I keep thinking maybe, somewhere in the Maine woods, she's still writing the rest of her story, on the cold, damp wood floor where the story never ended. I started volunteering as a forest rescuer in northern British Columbia in 1995. I was 22 years old, naive in many ways, including the belief that a forest is just a forest, that if you have enough food, a flashlight, and a radio, you'll be safe. I was wrong, not because nature is too harsh, but because there are places where people leave, but their traces never leave with them. In 1997, after a long dry season, the government decided to inspect and clean up the abandoned rescue stations scattered along the coast mountains. There were 14 stations in total, built in the 1960 seconds, serving as forest fire observation stations. I was assigned to Station 12, the deepest, in the middle of the old pine forest along Lake Kemino. The station only appeared in old records. There was no official road leading to it. It was a 2-day hike from Station 11. The last person on file was George L. Havelock, a firefighter who went missing in August. 1972 inches of wildfire. The name was familiar. I'd heard it mentioned by a colleague as a cautionary tale for new recruits. Don't go alone on a lightning night. We set out in early July, in the middle of the mild rainy season. I was accompanied by 2 people, my supervisor, Lorna, who had been at the station in 1980, and a young rescuer named Sam. Lorna spoke little, only occasionally reminding me to check my radio. She had a notebook in her backpack, and whenever she reached a rest stop, she'd open it and jot something down quickly before putting it back. I never got to see the page inside. By the afternoon of the second day, the jungle had thickened. The ground was damp, the moss was thick, and the wind was constantly changing direction. Sam, walking ahead, stopped abruptly, waving his hand. Ahead of us, through the thin mist, was a low wooden building, its walls faded, its roof slanted, its rusted antenna tilted to one side. The door was closed, but through the crack I could see a faint yellow light, as if from an old light bulb still burning. I thought my eyes were hallucinating, but Sam could see it too. "Someone's here," he whispered. We walked forward. The door was chained, but rusted enough to snap open with a slight tug. Inside was unusually cold. The air smelled of wet wood and old wood smoke. A topographical map of the mountains hung on the wall, red dots marking the 1972 fire zone. Beneath the map was a large black and white photograph of 6 men in firefighter uniforms standing in front of the station, smiling wryly. The caption, written in fountain pen, read, "Crew on duty August 1972. I held up the flashlight and looked closely. And then I saw something that sent a chill down my spine. There were 7 people in the photo. Between the 2 people in the back row, there was a shadowy figure, no face, just a smoky shape. But the person's hand was on the shoulder of the person next to him. Sam let out a breath. "This photo is broken," he said as if to reassure himself. But when I tilted the light, the shadow became clearer. Mrs. Lorna was silent. She walked to the wall, touched the photo, and said softly, "There were only 6 people in this photo before." I was about to ask again when she turned away, telling me to check the radio. On the old wooden table was still a radio, a PRC-90, plugged in, the indicator light still dimly lit. But this station had no power. I tried to turn it on. The screen flickered, then emitted a buzzing sound, mixed with the sound of metal colliding. 3 regular beats, tang, 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 like someone was tapping on an iron pipe. I turned off the radio, but the tapping sound continued for another beat before stopping. That night, it started to rain. We decided to stay overnight. I slept in my sleeping bag against the wall, Sam near the door. Lorna sat at the table the whole time, the kerosene lamp dimly lit. Near midnight, the radio came back on. No one touched it. The first sound was the howling of the wind, then a hoarse, broken man's voice, speaking very slowly. "Don't move your position. The fire's not out yet." Sam jumped up, swearing, trying to pull the power cord. But the radio wasn't plugged in, just connected to the broken antenna outside. When he touched it, the device went off, then went silent. I couldn't sleep for the rest of the night. That sentence kept ringing in my head, like an order repeated from somewhere decades ago. The next morning it was foggy. The station was damp and cold. Lorna sat by the window, looking out at the woods, her face tense. I saw an old photograph on the table in front of her, but now there were only 6 people. The shadowy figure was gone. I looked at it, thinking I was mistaken, but no, the photo was now completely normal, as if there had never been a 7th shadow. I asked Sam, and he confirmed that there had been 7 last night. Mrs. Lorna said nothing, just folded the photo and put it in her coat pocket. We packed up, preparing to leave. Before I went out the door, I heard the tang, tang sound from the radio again. 3 beats, very faint. Sam said it was just the sound of metal expanding due to the cold. I wasn't sure. As I passed through the door, I looked back. The desk lamp in the station suddenly turned on even though there was no power. The yellow light was weak, but very clear. In that moment, I saw reflected in the glass window a man in fire uniform, standing behind the desk, head bowed, thin shoulders, and on his chest was a name tag, G.L. Havilah. I blinked. The light went out. Nothing. We returned to Station 11 that evening. When we reported, I was the only one who mentioned the radio phenomenon. Both of them said they heard nothing but rain that night. I was silent. I still felt uneasy about that dim yellow light. A week later, when I returned to the main base, I found Lorna sitting alone in the file room. On her desk was an old notebook. I asked her what she had written in it. She opened it and turned to the last page. The handwriting was old and shaky, written in 1972. She whispered, "This page is not mine." The writing read, "Signal sent. Response team not yet arrived. Fire not yet out. Hold position." I stared at the writing for so long that my neck felt cold. For some reason, I remembered the 3-beat knock and the hoarse voice from the radio that night. It was all the same. 2 months later, Lorna asked for early retirement. Sam was transferred to the south. As for me, I stayed on for another year, but never returned to that forest. In the spring of 2001, during a major fire near Lake Kimano, firefighters discovered a small station that had been exposed by the burning trees. It was located 500 meters deeper than Station 12 on the current map. Inside, there were only scorched walls and a fallen wooden sign with the faint inscription, Station 12. In the ashes, they found a cassette tape. The label had peeled off, but when played back in the lab, they heard 3 metallic taps in a hoarse male voice. "Don't leave your position. The fire is still going." The sound was exactly the same as the radio recording I saved in 1997. I still have that tape, though I've never dared to listen to it a second time. Sometimes, when I walk along the northern forest, I hear the sound of metal tapping somewhere far away, in 3 even beats. Maybe it's the wind hitting the old pipe. Maybe it was something else. I don't know. But every time I heard it, I unconsciously counted the beats tang, 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 and held my breath, waiting for the hoarse voice that followed. the voice of someone who had never left the 1972 shift. I never intended to stop that night, but sometimes just one wrong turn can change your life. In October 2003, my ex-girlfriend, Emma, and I drove from New Hampshire to Vermont. It had been drizzling all day. As we passed Route 302, the GPS lost signal, and so did my phone. The winding hillside road was lined with deciduous maple trees, glowing red in the twilight. Emma whispered, "It's beautiful, but don't you think it's a little quiet?" I laughed. It was the countryside, and the silence was natural. I didn't know that night, that silence, would be the last thing I wanted to remember. We strayed off the main road at around 8 p.m. The clock hands were a dim yellow, and the radio was crackling. I tried to turn around, but behind me was a white fog. The road ahead was narrow and winding, as if it were only for horse-drawn carriages. Suddenly Emma said, "There's a light, there's a house." Amidst the rain and mist, through the trees, a flickering yellow light appeared on the hillside to the right. Like a porch with a hanging lamp, the light was weak but warm. We all breathed a sigh of relief. At least someone was there. I turned onto the dirt road leading up. The car slid a few times in the mud. The road was steep and narrow, covered with ferns on both sides. When we got there, we saw a small wooden shack with an awning, a yellow light bulb hanging outside the door, the light flickering through the rain. I turned off the engine and stepped out first. There was no dog barking, no other light. The door of the shack was ajar. I called out, but no one answered. It was dark inside. Emma came up behind me and said softly, "There's a smell of smoke, like someone was cooking something." I pushed the door open. It opened gently, unlocked. The shack had only one room. On the wooden table in the middle of the room was a kettle of water, steaming slightly, and 3 chairs were placed around it. On the wall hung a few faded photographs of mountains and forests, a half-folded map of Vermont. But what stopped me was an old cassette player in the middle of the table, the tape spinning slowly, emitting a buzzing sound mixed with a vague, inarticulate whisper. I walked over and pressed the stop button. The sound stopped. The reel stopped midway. Emma stood beside me, trembling slightly. I was curious. On the tape was a paper label written in ballpoint pen. Recording 3, October 2003. I opened the lid and looked inside. The tape was new. I pressed play. The first sound was the sound of wind, then a low male voice, speaking slowly, distantly as through a metal tube. Record the list. 3 people, 1 me, 2 her, 3 you. I was stunned. The voice stopped just as it reached you. I looked at Emma, and she turned pale. "That's your name." I hung up immediately. For some reason, the sound of the rain outside echoed in my head, harmonizing with my heartbeat. The room suddenly felt cramped. I pulled out the tape and stuffed it into my jacket pocket. Emma tugged at my hand. "Let's go." I nodded, turned off the porch light and went to the car. But as soon as the door closed, the yellow light came back on, untouched. From inside the cabin, I looked through the rearview mirror through the misty rain. I saw in that light 2 figures sitting at the table, heads bowed, as if listening to a cassette player. One of them looked up, but his face was completely pale, no details, just a blank reflection of the yellow light. I stepped on the gas. The car pulled off the hill, the tires screeching through the mud. Neither of us said anything until we saw the main streetlights again. The GPS worked again, but the map only showed a blank space where we had passed. There was no dirt road, no tent. We reached the nearest town around midnight. I parked my car in front of a gas station and played the cassette tape back into the car. It spun, but there was no sound, just silence. I tried rewinding it, and it was still blank. I thought maybe it was the humidity. Emma was silent all the way home. 2 weeks later, we broke up. Not because of that, at least I thought so. But later, I learned that she had told her best friend that he didn't leave the tent that night. I did. I don't remember that clearly. I only remember driving away, us both in the car. I remember it clearly, the sound of the windshield wipers, the street lights, her cold, trembling hands. But when I looked in the rearview mirror that night, all I saw was an empty backseat. Maybe the darkness was deceiving. In 2010, I moved house and found the old tape in a photo box. The tape label was faded, but I recognized the handwritten note. Recording 3, October 2003. I found a new cassette player, plugged it in, and pressed play. After a few seconds of silence, the wind picked up again. Then a female voice, not Emma's, but a softer, younger one, spoke softly. "Are you back in the tent yet?" Then silence. I sat motionless. No one else was in the room, but the smell of damp wood wafted in, as distinct as opening the door of an old tent. I pulled out the tape, intending to throw it away, but couldn't. 3 months later, I decided to go back to Vermont. I lied about going on business, but really I just wanted to see if it was real. The old maps didn't show any dirt roads leading up the hill. I asked locals, and no one knew where the cabin with the yellow light was. An older man at the coffee shop said, after I described it, that the area had been the site of a deer hunting lodge since the 1972nd, abandoned after a lightning strike in 1981. No one has been up there for a long time, he said. People hear porch lights on at night, but nothing in the morning. I drove to the exact area. It was wet and slippery, but there were no turns. I stopped only when I saw a clearing covered with rotting maple leaves. I got out and smelled the burning wood. Among the leaves, I saw a small round light bulb broken in two, its wire singed. I picked it up. The bulb was still warm. I didn't know why. When I got back to the car, I heard a click, a soft click in my pocket. It was a tape. The cassette player opened by itself. I didn't touch it. Then the tape rewound, making a slight hissing sound. I listened, and in the speaker, for the first time, the old male voice sounded clearer, closer, almost right next to my ear. No one left the shack. I threw the player into the passenger seat, drove away, and didn't look back. It started to rain heavily, pouring rain, washing away the tire tracks. When I reached town, I stopped to catch my breath. Outside the window, on the distant hillside, a small yellow light flashed in the rain, then went out. I didn't know if it was real or an illusion. I never played the tape again after that year. I still kept it in the drawer, wrapped in cloth, as a habit to reassure myself that as long as I didn't listen to it again, everything would stop there. But sometimes on stormy nights, when the electricity in the house was flickering, I would hear the faint crackling of a cassette tape in the living room, even though no player was playing. And in the silence between the crackling, a distant female voice would ask the same question. "Are you back in the hut yet?" I never answered.